Hello and welcome to another episode of my absolute beginner tutorial. We're now probably starting to get a little bit away from being an absolute beginner. I may move a little bit quickly through this tutorial, but there are still a few basic things that you need to learn if you are an absolute beginner before moving on to some of the more complex stuff. And today is going to be just a real simple video showing a couple of tips as we make the containers for our milkshake that will finally make the milkshake in the final episode 10 tutorial. So first thing I want to do, just to touch up on my last video was coming off of a break of several months. I made a few mistakes. I'll probably make a few more today. Things I want to do are, number one, just want to do a couple of edits on my seat that I made. I had changed my mix shader to 0. That means essentially I'm not using at all the glossy shader. It's literally all the diffuse shader with the textures. So I want to change this back and get a little bit of a gloss on it. I'm going to make it 0.1 so that it still has that gloss on it on the seat. Just as a reminder, if you use a mix shader and you're at a factor of 0 or 1, you aren't really using a mix shader. You're just bypassing one of your inputs there. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to grab this seat on the Z-axis. I just realized I don't have my screencast keys on. So I'll show you really quick how I turn screencast keys on. You may need to install this, but I'll go into my add-ons, and it's under 3D View, little one called screencast keys. Just check the box. If you need to install it from file, you'll need to go find the file on the Blender website or in the Blender forums and install from file using this button here. When it shows up, you should be able to just check it and it appears, and now I have my screencast keys on. Sorry about that, guys. Told you I'd make mistakes. So I want to move my seat up just a little bit, G to grab, Z axis, and then I wanted to make my legs a little bit longer. So I'm going to scale those along the Z-axis. Unfortunately, it scales them both up and down, so I'm going to do that. They're sticking through a little bit, so I'm going to grab them on the Z-axis until I can't see them underneath anymore. And perfect. Just wanted to make my stool a little bit taller, not as squat. So those are a couple things I'm just finishing up from the last tutorial. This tutorial, we're going to use the layers again. I'm going to make the glass for the milkshake. So I'm going to go to layer 2 by hitting 2, and I'm going to hit N, the N key, to bring up this side menu. This is extra options about the 3D view window, and I want to add in a picture of my milkshake glass that I want so that I can model it based on a picture. And the way I'll do that is, let me just collapse some of these that we're not going to be using. There is a menu called background images, and we're going to open that and we're going to click add image, and you can see some options. We're just going to open the file, which is in my downloads, and it's called milkshake glass. Great, so we've opened it and we can't see it, and that's normal. The only way to see it is to, number one, be in one of those perfect views. Remember, we're using the numpad to go to those perfect views and line up. You can see in the bottom left of the 3D view window, we're lining up perfectly those axes that we have. Those are the perfect views. Number two, you have to be in orthographic view, and we get to that by pressing 5 on the numpad, and there you can see my milkshake glass appear as a picture in the background. I'm actually going to hit 1 on the numpad to go into the ZX axis, Z being blue, X being red. And then I'm going to use these options on the bottom. You can change the opacity of the background images. I'm going to change my opacity to 1. I don't need it to be at all translucent. You may need to for some things. I'm going to use these sliders here to move it. I'm going to try and line it up a little bit. I think a 0.3 on mine. And let's see, move this up to the z-axis just so it's sitting on the z-axis. Oop. And then remember, if you want to go up and down, you use the shift and scroll wheel. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, the way I'm going to model this, I'm actually going to do two techniques to show you how to model, and both of these techniques are good for what are called radially symmetric objects. What that means is if I can stick a line through it and have it be symmetric on all sides, like a glass or a pipe or a vase, things like that. Even fruit is usually radially symmetric. Things that you can stick a line through and have it symmetric going outward. And that line on this one would be like our z-axis. It would be symmetric along the z-axis no matter how we rotated it. So the way we're going to do this, first of all, is the little more tedious way first, and then we'll do an easier way second. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to first be in object mode. I'm going to make an object. I'm going to, check your 3D cursor, make sure that's in the right spot. Make an object. I'm just going to make a circle. And a circle, as you can see, is literally a flat circle that has no faces. It's just vertices. I'm going to scale that circle. I'm going to do a Shift Z to scale it out along. I talked about this in my last tutorial. I'm going to scale it out along the X and Y plane so that it's bigger now. And then go back to my view, and I'm going to extrude up the shape. So I'm going to hit extrude, go Z, extrude, grab, Z, extrude. Oh, I'm not in edit mode. Okay, got it now. Edit mode, extrude is E. We're just going to come up along the Z-axis a little bit, and every single time I extrude, I want to be coming up along the Z-axis. And then what I'm going to do is hit scale on each new ring that I extrude up. So I'll extrude a ring, and then I'll click, and then I'll hit scale and pull it in or out depending on how it needs to be. So extrude, Z, pull up, scale, pull in. And you can see it's not going to be perfectly aligned, but this picture is going to be a good guide for me. So extrude, Z, pull up, scale, pull in. And I can come over here and you can see it's slightly off to the side. So I'm going to, oh, that's up and down. I'm going to move it over to the side just a little bit. And now it looks like it fits better. So again, extrude, Z, and I can come up pretty far on this one because it doesn't change its width that much. I'm not going for extremely detailed as usual, but I'm just extruding up and then scaling in or out. Extrude, Z, up, and then scaling out. I apologize, this is probably extremely boring at this point, but you get the gist of it. And this is a good way to make use of backgrounds. The alternative that I'm going to show you next is a bit easier, though it still has its tedious moments. So let me just, I think you get the gist of it. I'm actually not going to finish the shape, but I would finish the shape this way. I don't believe, okay. So I was in wireframe. Remember, you can toggle wireframe with Z. If it might be easier to hit Z to keep it in wireframe while you're doing this, just so you can see your shape. I'm not going to finish the shape this way, but you get the idea. We're going to actually delete this. In edit mode, we're going to delete it. We're not going to delete the object so that we can still work with vertices as a separate object. And I'm going to delete all these vertices, and I'm going to go back to that perfect view, and I'm going to show you the easy way to do it. The easy way goes back to the very second tutorial, I believe, where we started making things point by point. I told you it's not common, and it's not, but if I control click, make a point, I can keep control clicking. As I talked about in the tutorial, it'll automatically connect those. But because these axes get in the way, and I don't feel like turning off the axes, which you can do with control space, I don't feel like keeping them off because I like them as guides. So what I'm going to do is just hit E for extrude, and I'm just going to extrude point by point and come up along this. It's a little bit faster because I don't have to worry about scaling in or out. I'm only working in essentially 2 dimensions right now, and it's pretty easy because I'm only doing one side. So once I come up and quickly extrude my shape, I will literally have a string of points. I will have 0 faces, and I will just have this line essentially. Okay, so as you can see, I've followed the one edge. Let me spin it and show you what I'm working with. I have just this string of lines. Now I'm going to open up my toolbox. I'm going to close this right hand side with N, open up the toolbox with T, and in edit mode I'm going to select all of my points by hitting A, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to find this button called spin, and I'm going to click on spin, and it's going to look ridiculously weird. Don't worry about how it looks at first. We're going to come and check out our options for spin right down in this menu that I'm going to pull up. We have steps, which I'll come back to. We have angle, which I'll come back to. We're going to fix the center at 0 because that's where we want our object to rotate around. And then our axis, we're going to do 0 in the x axis, 0 in the y axis, and 1 for the z axis. Now you can see the shape start to appear. We're only going 90 degrees. Wanted to give you a tip. If you want to then further modify it, for example, if you wanted to put special ridges on or a special design on your glass, I'm not going to. That's kind of an advanced thing. You could go in and sculpt it just at a 90-degree spin here and then mirror modifier it to the other 4 sides around the x and y axis. If you didn't follow that, don't worry. We're not going to do that. That's more of an advanced thing. But mirror modifier could come into play here if you want to use that. Instead, we're just going to do our angle as 360, have it spin all the way around and make us a nice cup. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the number of steps up a little bit. This is a small object, so we don't really need a lot of steps, but it's going to be the focal point of our picture at the end. And so I'm going to go up to, I think, 15 looks good. Well, let's do 16. That way we have it 4 per quadrant. Okay, so that's our cup. That's the easy way of doing the cup. Next thing you'll notice is that this is a paper thin cup, and we're going to make it out of glass. In fact, let's go apply that now. Let's change where it says circle over here, and we're going to call this glass. Let's go, I'm in my render settings. I'm going to go over to the material settings, and I'm going to add a new material. And I'm just simply going to change this diffuse shader to a glass shader. And that's all I'm going to do. Actually, I am going to give it a slight bluish tint, but barely at all. It still looks white on my screen. Okay, so now we have one problem, which is we have this paper thin sheet of glass that's not going to look very good, and it has a hole in the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take care of that hole in the bottom. And the way we're going to do that is select the bottom. We're going to turn off Occlude Geometry, which is this button here. It lets us see through. We're going to go back to our one view. We're going to hit the circle select to get our circle, and we're just going to drag it along the bottom, being very careful to only get that bottom row. Hit escape to get out of the selection tool, and I want to go around and I want to make sure that I got all of the points on just the bottom and no other points. Okay, once I'm sure of that, I'm going to take my hand off the mouse. I'm going to hit E for extrude, and then just hit enter to essentially duplicate those points. Then I'm going to take my new duplicated set, I'm going to hit W, and I'm going to merge at center. And that gives me, let me turn on occlude geometry, that gives me that nice center point on the bottom of the glass. Okay, the other problem still stands. We have this paper thin piece of glass. It's going to look weird with the light going through it. We want some thickness to it. The easiest way to do that is to select all. We're going to go to our modifiers tab and we're going to find under generate the solidify button. The only parameter you need to worry about is this thickness one. And you can really just drag it and look at it and see how thick you want it. I think I'm going to end on a 0.08. That looks like a good thickness for me. And once that's done, our glass is done. So we can move it back into the previous scene. If you recall, we're in object mode, so I'm just going to hit M, hit 1, and then go back to layer 1, and you can see our, I'm going to go to materials here. You can see our glass is ginormous. We're just going to scale it down to probably about 0.1 for its size. We're still in orthographic view. I'm going to hit 5 so that things look a little better. Grab Z, pull this up, and we have our glass now. I'm going to hold down Shift and scroll down, Shift and scroll up. Okay. Now I want to scale this up just a little bit, probably there. Grab Z just before it clips into the chair, so right there, looks good. Alright, so now we have our glass. We're good on that. Let's make sure our shading is smooth. And we're going to hit A for, the only thing you need to worry about with the spin thing that we did is we're going to go in edit mode and just make sure we're going to hit W and we're going to click remove doubles. And you can see we removed 19 vertices there. Those were likely just ones along one edge that were doubled up since we spun it from 0 to 360. The 0 and the 360 ones were probably sitting at the same point. So you always want to do that, and in fact that's a good habit to do on anything you're working on, is just to go in every now and then and remove doubles. That's in the W menu, and you do that while you're in edit mode. It'll tell you up at the top here how many you removed. Okay, so let's click on a quick preview of our scene. That was the 0 key. My camera's not lined up and I'm not going to play with it right here, so I'm just going to go to rendered. It's probably freezing up on you right now. Once it comes back into play, you should be able to see my glass with a slight bluish tint. I think it looks pretty good. Because of how the light plays and the thickness of the glass on the top and the bottom, those areas do seem darker. There's a dark rim along the top of the glass. That's not anything I put in, it's just the way the material is applied. And then one other thing I think I forgot from the previous tutorial, I'm going to go back to my material view, is with the chair legs, I want to make sure that their shading is smooth as well, because those are chrome, they're supposed to look pretty smooth. Okay, I like the ridges on the seat because most real seats have those, so I'm not going to change that shading to smooth, but you are welcome to if you would like. In fact, they stay there with smooth, so I'll go to smooth. Changing everything to smooth shading. Now the last thing I want to do, the way I've envisioned this scene is to have a metal cup, the ones that you mix milkshakes in when you work in the food service industry. I want to have a metal cup tilted pouring out the milkshake. And the milkshake itself we're going to deal with next time. But I'm going to make that metal cup. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go to layer 2. I'm going to go to my view here, orthographic and perfect view. I'm actually going to get rid of this background image, which I can do by clicking the X right here next to where the file name is. I can hide it with the eye, but I'm just going to remove it completely because I have no use for it anymore. And I'm going to I'm going to, in object mode, Shift A, add a mesh. I'm going to make a circle, and I'm going to extrude it along the Z axis. In edit mode, extrude Z. And then I'm going to scale it outward slightly, extrude Z, scale outward slightly, extrude Z, and scale outward slightly. And that's going to be my metal cup. That's all it's going to be. Let me quickly just grab this, grab this bottom edge like we did on the other one. I'm going to extrude, hit enter, W for merge at center. That gives us our bottom to the cup. I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to add again, just like I did before, the solidify modifier. This one's going to be a little thinner. I think 0.03 would be good. And remember, it's Z to turn off wireframe mode. That'll give you a little bit of an idea. It looks perfect. Let's go over to smooth shading on this one. Which is set while you're in object mode. And we're going to add a metallic texture to this one. We're not going to do chrome necessarily like the chair legs. We may end up coming back and doing that anisotropic, but for now I think I'm just going to do a glossy gray. And I think that will look a bit like a metal. So just do a good dark gray. These are usually stainless steel, so dark is good. And that's my cup for my milkshake that's going to be pouring into the glass. So I'm going to call this one cup. Up here, cup. And cup is going to pour into the glass. So let's move this back in object mode. Move back to layer 1. So that's M and then 1. And it's pretty big, so hit 5 to get back into the perspective view. I'm going to scale this down to, I don't know, 0.1 to start, and we'll go up from there. Grab it, pull it up. We're going to want that a little bit bigger, so I'm going to scale it to be probably a little bit bigger than, or about the same size as that cup. Okay, I'm going to actually grab this along the y-axis, and then I'm going to rotate it along the x-axis, like so. And with that done, what I imagine doing in my next tutorial is doing a small fluid simulation to get a good picture of milkshake pouring out of the metal cup into the glass cup. And as you envision that, I'm going to change this to rendered. It'll probably freeze for a second. Don't panic. I just want to see if the metal texture looks okay. And to me it does. It's very glossy. Almost like glass. I may put that anisotropic on it. In fact, let's look at the difference between anisotropic and no anisotropic. So I'm going to do Shift A down here on the node editor. I'm going to add a shader called anisotropic. This is the one we talked about last time with the chair legs. I'm going to add the mix shader. Yeah, that's much better. That's much better. You can see the difference. Let me show you the difference in case you couldn't see it. Let me give it a second just to normalize. This is half and half anisotropic with glossy, which if you recall on the chrome legs we did half and half as well. So with this I'm going to show you all anisotropic looks like the following, which looks relatively good for metal, though it is white. So I'm going to just let that adjust. That's all anisotropic. You can see it looks actually pretty good for metal. I'm going to show you all glossy now. Go back. And it looks more like glass, honestly. it's non-translucent glass. So I'm going to do probably 75 on the shader, 75% or 0.75. I'll let that normalize, and you can see as it should be, it's not as glossy as the chair legs. It looks more like a burnished or polished nickel kind of look, like stainless steel should. And that's our setup for now. So I'm going to leave it at this. This tutorial is going to be done. Like I said, next time we're going to look into getting a milkshake pouring out. We're going to touch a little bit on handling that animation, and hopefully it'll be good. If you have questions, please let me know. I'd be glad to